The air in the hall of Runnymede is thick with mist, a gray shroud that curls around the stone walls like a blanket from the depths of history. The ground beneath the feet of the gathered men is slick with dew, the first breath of dawn still chilling the earth. A single torch flickers in the center of the chamber, casting long shadows that stretch across the floor, playing upon the rough-hewn stones like ghosts of the past. The silence in the room is profound, suffocating. It is as if the earth itself holds its breath, waiting for the inevitable to unfold. This moment, this single breath in time, will be remembered long after the voices of those present have turned to dust. It is a moment that will reshape not only the fate of one kingdom but an entire world. The Magna Carta, a parchment of binding consequence, lies before the reluctant monarch. Its ink, still wet in places, bears the weight of rebellion, of broken oaths, and the dawn of a new era. The sounds in the hall are almost imperceptible. The scrape of a quill upon paper, the faint rustling of fine linen as men shift uneasily in their places, the gentle creak of old wood as it bears the weight of history. The tension in the room is palpable, a quiet but irresistible force, drawing every man in the chamber into its web of fate. King John of England stands at the head of the room, his once proud form hunched, as if the crown upon his brow has grown too heavy with the years. His face, usually flushed with anger or pride, is now pale, drawn. His hands, one steady with the command of kingship, tremble ever so slightly as they hover over the parchment. He is a man cornered, not by a foreign enemy, but by his own failure, his own unwillingness to listen to those who once swore fealty to him. His brow is furrowed in thought, but beneath the storm of his mind there is a deep sadness. The world he has built, the power he has held, is slipping through his fingers like water through a cracked vessel. And yet, here he stands, on the precipice of history, about to sign his name to a document that will forever alter the nature of monarchy itself. The barons who stand around him do not look triumphant. Their faces are not those of victors, but of men who know the quiet weight of what is about to happen. They are men who have fought for this moment, but who have also fought against the power of kings for years. They are weary, battle-worn, their hands stained with blood not just of war, but of compromise. Their eyes do not gleam with the glow of conquest, but are dark with the understanding that this moment, while a victory, is also a moment of profound loss. For the first time in history, the divine right of kings is being questioned, and the unshakable power of a monarch is being reduced to a mere agreement. What the barons have won is not just a concession of a king, but the promise of change, a change that will reverberate throughout the generations. The parchment lies before King John, its edges rough, frayed from the countless hands that have touched it in preparation for this fateful moment. The wax seal at the bottom is yet unbroken, awaiting the press of the king's signet ring. The wax is a deep red, like blood upon the page, and it catches the torchlight with a gleam that sends a chill down the spine of anyone who gazes upon it. The king's eyes linger on the parchment for a moment too long, as if he is searching for something he cannot find, a way out of the trap he has set for himself. His mind spins with thoughts of what might have been, of what he might have done differently to avoid this moment. But there is no escape. The die has been cast, and all that remains is to accept what is inevitable. The barons, too, watch the king, their expressions unreadable. Some of them stand with their arms crossed, others with their hands resting uneasily on the hilts of their swords. There is no joy here, no sense of triumph in the air. There is only the heavy knowledge that this moment is a turning point, a watershed in history. The world will never be the same. The Magna Carta, this simple piece of parchment, will become the symbol of a new world order. No longer will kings be untouchable, their words the law of the land. No longer will they wield absolute power over their subjects. From this moment forward, the king will be bound by law, just as his people are. The power of the monarchy, once so absolute, will now be shared, and the cracks in the edifice of royal authority will begin to widen. The silence stretches on, long and uncomfortable, as King John raises his hand to the wax seal. His fingers tremble, the ring on his finger catching the light as it moves. It is a delicate moment, one that feels suspended in time, as if the world itself is holding its breath. The king's gaze flickers over the document once more, his eyes narrowing as if searching for some final sign that this is the right course, that this will somehow repair the damage done to his reign. But there is no answer. There is only the inevitable pressing down upon him, a weight too great to escape. He presses the signet ring into the wax with a soft, almost inaudible sound. The seal is broken, and with it, the finality of the decision is sealed. A moment that will echo through the centuries. The king's signature is now on the page, his name now etched into the annals of history. It is done. The room is still. The air seems to hang in a moment of suspended animation. The barons do not cheer. There are no cries of victory. There is only the weight of what has been accomplished, and the uncertain path that lies ahead. The king, his face pale and drawn, looks down at the parchment, his breath slow and steady, as if he is already preparing for the consequences of his actions. The Magna Carta is not just a document. It is a symbol of a world that no longer exists. It is a world where kings no longer reign supreme, but are forced to share power with those they once ruled over. The barons begin to move, slowly, cautiously, their eyes never leaving the king. They know that this moment is not the end, but the beginning of something far greater. The king may have signed a document, but the real work is yet to come. The Magna Carta will now be tested in the fires of history. Its meaning will be tested by every king who comes after John. It is a fragile thing, this document, its meaning ever shifting with the passing of time. But for now, in this moment, it is enough. As the barons begin to file out of the room, their steps echoing in the hollow stone halls, King John remains behind, staring at the parchment in his hands. His mind is a storm of conflicting emotions. He feels the weight of what he has just done, the knowledge that he has given up something irretrievable. His power, his authority, his divine right, gone, rendered meaningless by the stroke of a quill. The world has changed in that one small act, and nothing will ever be the same. He feels it deep within his bones, that creeping sense of loss, as if the very foundations of his reign are crumbling around him. Outside, the world is already beginning to stir. The first light of dawn breaks through the clouds, casting a soft glow over the land. The sound of nature, birds calling in the distance, the rustle of leaves in the trees, seem to carry a quiet sense of renewal. The dawn of a new era is upon them, and yet, within the walls of Runnymede, there is no sense of celebration, only a deep, pervasive silence, as if the land itself is mourning the passing of a way of life. The Magna Carta is a silent, unspoken promise to the people of England. It is the beginning of a world in which kings must answer to the law, and the law is no longer the whims of an all-powerful monarch, but something greater, something more enduring. And though King John may not fully grasp it now, this moment, the signing of the Magna Carta, will become one of the most important moments in the history of the world. The reverberations of this act will echo through the halls of time, long after the names of the barons and the king have faded into dust, and the world, for all its pain and turmoil, will be forever changed. The morning air is sharp, biting at the skin with the first breath of dawn, but the cold is not enough to quell the weight of what has transpired. As the sun barely rises over the mist-laden fields of Runnymede, a gathering of men, swathed in heavy cloaks, their boots sinking into the wet earth, are drawn together by a momentous act, a moment that will forever change the course of history. A thick silence hangs in the air, not one born of peace, but of solemnity. It is the silence of inevitability. Within the confines of the ancient hall, the warmth of a single hearth fire barely reaches the stone walls. The shadows are long, stretching far beyond the reach of the flames, casting strange shapes upon the faces of the men who have come together in this fleeting space of power and rebellion. The scent of damp earth mingles with the sharpness of burning oak, the smoke curling like wisps of memory that will never quite fade. Their cloaks rustle quietly as they shift in place, the murmurs of whispered conversations halted as the moment nears. And there at the center of this assembly stands the king, John of England, his regal countenance momentarily stripped away, replaced with an expression of quiet desperation. The Magna Carta, an instrument of both defiance and concession, rests on the table before him. Its edges are jagged from the many hands that have gripped it, and its ink still smells faintly of fear, a pungent, tangible presence that no amount of time will ever fully erase. The document sits there like a final verdict, as if it were not the result of years of struggle, but an unavoidable conclusion to a story long written. King John, his brow furrowed in thought, stares down at the parchment. the weight of it pressing on his chest more than he can bear. The flickering firelight dances over his face, casting fleeting glimpses of both his exhaustion and his resignation. He had never imagined that the power of a king could be so easily eroded. For years, he had ruled with a sense of invincibility. His word law, his will supreme. But now, as he gazes down at the words that had been meticulously crafted by his enemies, the barons, the clergy, the very men who had once sworn loyalty to him, he knows that everything he has fought for, everything he has built, is crumbling. The Magna Carta is not merely a contract. It is the unraveling of an idea that has held sway for centuries, the divine right of kings. In this document lies the shifting of power, the challenging of authority, the questioning of a monarch's absolute control over his subjects. He is no longer the sole arbiter of fate. He is now bound by law, bound by the demands of the very men who had once bowed before him. John's hands hover over the parchment, trembling slightly, as though he can sense the irrevocability of the act he is about to commit. His fingers graze the wax seal, still unbroken, as if trying to find some final refuge in its form. He had never thought it would come to this, signing a document that strips him of so much. And yet, the faces of the barons who surround him are hard and unmoving, their eyes fixed on him with intensity that speaks of years of frustration, of rebellion, of the steady erosion of trust that has led them to this moment. The men who once served him now demand that he, too, be bound by something greater than himself. The air is heavy, pregnant with the weight of history. The crackling of the fire fills the silence in fits and starts, but the sounds outside are what linger in John's mind. The distant clatter of hooves on gravel, the faintest murmur of voices, voices that have been hushed for so long, voices that now grow louder, more insistent, as if the land itself is calling for justice. The people of England, once silent beneath his rule, now rise with a collective voice that refuses to be ignored. They demand the same rights, the same laws that have been afforded to privileged few. And it is these voices, these demands, that have driven John to this place. His crown no longer feels as heavy as it once did. Now it feels like a burden, a symbol of the failure of a king who could not hold his kingdom together. He takes a deep breath, his chest rising and falling with the weight of this moment. He turns his eyes to the barons. Their faces a mixture of resolve and sorrow. They are not smiling. There is no joy in their victory. Their victory is one of necessity, not a triumph. For they, too, know what this means. They know that they are not merely challenging one king, but the entire system of monarchy that has stood unchallenged for centuries. The idea that one man could hold absolute power over another is, in this moment, no longer a given. The Magna Carta is a symbol of the shifting of tides, of a kingdom awakening to the realization that power must be shared, that kings must answer not just to God, but to the law. The fire in the hearth crackles again, and the scent of smoke intensifies, sharp and invasive. John's hand drops to the seal, his fingers brushing the wax one last time before pressing it down into the parchment. The sound of the seal breaking is quiet, but it rings in the room with the force of thunder. It is the sound of finality, the sound of a world shifting, of a king's power fading away, of the irrevocable passage of time. With a fluid motion, John's hand moves to the quill, dipping it into ink as the barons stand in tense silence. He hovers over the document, and for a brief moment, time seems to slow. His signature is not the proud flourish of a monarch confident in his rule. It is the hesitant stroke of a man caught between two worlds, the world of a king who is ruled by divine right, and the world of a ruler who must now bow to the demands of his people. The ink flows onto the page, marking not just the end of a chapter in his reign, but the beginning of an entirely new story. A story in which he is no longer the central figure. A story in which the people, the barons, the law itself, are as powerful as the crown he once wore. As the ink dries, the room remains still, each man locked in the realization that history has just been made. The barons stand tall, their eyes fixed upon John with mixture of respect and quiet sorrow. They understand the magnitude of what has occurred here, but they also understand the cost. There is no joy in this victory, only the bitter taste of necessity. They have secured their place in history, but they also know that what they have asked of their king is not just a concession. It is a surrender, and no man, not even a king, can bear the weight of such surrender lightly. King John lowers his quill, his hand trembling slightly as he sets aside. The Magna Carta lies before him, its words now signed, its fate sealed. His breath comes in shallow gasps as he takes in the enormity of what has just happened. This document, this simple agreement, will change the world in ways he cannot yet fully comprehend. But in his heart, he knows one thing for certain. The world he has known is gone. The monarchy, as he has understood it, is no more. And in its place, a new order begins to take root. Outside, the air is warmed slightly, the rising sun casting a soft glow over the land. The mists begin to lift, the first rays of sunlight breaking through the clouds. There is a sense of quiet rebirth in the land, as if the earth itself recognizes that a new chapter has begun. The Magna Carta has been signed, and with it, a new age is dawning, one in which kings will no longer be above the law. It is a victory for the barons, for the people, for England itself. But it is also a solemn victory, born of necessity, born of a deep and abiding struggle for justice. As the barons begin to file out of the hall, their footsteps soft on the stone floor, King John remains behind, alone in the weight of his own thoughts. His kingdom has shifted beneath him, and there is no going back. The crown may still rest upon his head, but its weight has changed. The world has changed. And in this moment of quiet reflection, John understands, perhaps for the first time, the true cost of power, what it means to hold the world in your hands, and then to let it slip away. Outside the stone walls of Runnymede, the winds stir, carrying with them the promise of change. The world is no longer the same. And neither, it seems, is the man who has just signed away the last of his absolute power. The Tower of Windsor looms high against the morning sky, its silhouette a dark outline against the pale gray of dawn. The cold stone of the fortress seems to exude a quiet, oppressive weight, as if it were alive, watching over the kingdom it had protected for centuries. Inside its walls, the silence is overwhelming. The only sound to the occasional whisper of servants' footfalls, the distant creak of old wood, and the soft crackle of fire that burns low in the hearth. The air smells faintly of soot and damp stone, tinged with the heavy scent of inevitability. King John stands before the great window of the royal chamber, his back to the fire. He stares out across the landscape, his gaze distant, lost in thought. The world outside seems still, the fields quiet and untouched by the chaos that churns within the walls of his own heart. But John knows that nothing will ever be still again, not after what he has just agreed to. His thoughts are a whirlpool, spinning faster and faster as he considers the consequences of the events that have brought him here. The Magna Carta. He had never imagined it would come to this, to signing a document that binds him, a king, to the very laws that he once ruled with impunity. The sound of the quill scratching across parchment, the seal pressed into wax, all of it now feels like a death knell to the absolute monarchy he had long taken for granted. His mind replays the moment over and over again, standing at Runnymede, the cold of the early morning seeping into his bones, the heavy weight of his crown pressing down on his brow. The barons that stood around him, their eyes hard with the knowledge that they had won, not with swords, but with something more insidious, the power of the people. The Magna Carta had been forced upon him, and yet, as he stands here in the solitude of his chamber, he wonders, did he truly have a choice? John's fingers, which once gripped the reins of power with unrelenting force, now tremble slightly as he rests them on the windowsill. He had never truly understood what it meant to be a king, not until now. It had always been about control, about holding the kingdom together, about enforcing his will upon all who lived within its borders. He had seen himself as a god on earth, his word as unbreakable as the stones of his castle. But in the moments leading up to the signing of the Magna Carta, something within him had shifted. The idea that his power was divine, untouchable, seemed suddenly fragile, almost absurd. His kingdom had slipped away from him, bit by bit, year after year, until he was left with only this, a desperate, reluctant agreement that would change the very fabric of his reign. The ink had dried on the parchment of the Magna Carta, sealing his fate in the cold, hard strokes of legalism. And yet, even now, John could not fully grasp the weight of it. Yes, the barons had won a victory, but in the end, it felt like a loss to him, not just of power, but of something much deeper, something more personal. His identity as king, as ruler, had always been wrapped up in his absolute control. Now that control was gone. He was no longer the supreme authority in his own land. He had bound himself to a system, to laws that could no longer be broken at his whim. The silence of the room presses in on him, and for a moment he allows himself to close his eyes, shutting out the sight of the cold stone walls, the tapestries that hang lifeless in the gloom. The fire crackles softly, a meager attempt at warmth, but it does little to soothe him. His thoughts drift back to the moments before the signing, when he had looked into the eyes of the men who had forced him into this corner. The barons, their faces hard with resolve, had stood in quiet defiance as he placed his signature on the document that would forever alter the course of his reign. They had won not by force, but by the silent power of unity, the power of a kingdom that had grown weary of a monarch who ruled without regard for the common man. But it had not been only the barons. His own nobles had turned against him, his court divided, his rule unraveling beneath him. The whispers of rebellion had grown louder with each passing day, the murmur of unrest rippling to the halls of his palace, through the streets of London, through every village and town in the kingdom. The world that he had known, the world of absolute monarchy, was dying, and he had been powerless to stop it. The Magna Carta was the final blow, the moment that sealed the fate of the medieval monarchy. And with it came the end of an era in which kings ruled as gods, unchallenged, unopposed. John's mind turns back to the people, the ones he had once ruled with such certainty. He remembers the smell of fresh bread baking in the villages, the laughter of children playing in the streets, the quiet, unspoken bond between monarch and subject. But that bond had been broken, fractured by years of mismanagement, cruelty, and distrust. The Magna Carta had not come from a place of goodwill. It had come from the desperation of a people who had finally reached the end of their patience. And in that desperation, they had asked for more than just freedom. They had asked for justice, for accountability, for a king who would no longer stand above the law. The room seems to grow colder, the stone walls closing in on him. The fire in the hearth sputters, sending a shower of sparks into the air. John moves away from the window, his feet heavy on the stone floor, as though the very weight of history presses down upon him. He can feel in the pit of his stomach a sense of foreboding that has been growing ever since that fateful day at Runnymede. The Magna Carta, with its promises of freedom and justice, has not only changed the course of his reign, it has changed the course of the kingdom itself. No longer will England be ruled by the whims of one man. No longer will the king sit alone in his court, his word law. The voices of the people have been heard, and their demands will not be silenced. As he paces across the room, his eyes fall on the royal seal that rests on the table. The seal, the symbol of his authority, the emblem of his kingship, sits there, cold and untouched, a stark reminder of what he has lost. The seal, once used to proclaim the king's power, now seems to mock him. He feels its weight in his chest, as though it were a tangible thing that could crush him. What had he truly lost? His power, yes, but more than that, he had lost a sense of self. He had lost the certainty of his place in the world. The monarchy, as he had known it, was no more, and in its place, something new had been born, a kingdom in which a king was not a god, but a man who must answer to the law, to the people, to history itself. John stands before the fire, the flames licking the air, their orange glow dancing in his eyes. He can feel the heat against his skin, but it does nothing to warm him. The fire burns, but the cold inside him refuses to relent. He had been raised to believe that kings were invincible, that their rule was ordained by God. But now, as he stands here, the truth of the Magna Carta presses in on him. The idea of absolute power has been shattered. A king is no longer a ruler by divine right. A king is bound by the laws of the land, by the will of the people. The very idea of monarchy is changing, and he is powerless to stop it. The crackle of the fire fills the room, but it does little to drown out the sound of his own thoughts. The relentless drumbeat of regret, of loss, of the slow erosion of his authority. In the end, it is not the barons who have defeated him. It is not the rebellion of his nobles. It is the simple, unrelenting force of time, the passing of an age, the inevitable shift of power that has come with the signing of the Magna Carta. It is the dawning of a new world, one in which kings must share their power, one in which no man is above the law. The silence of the room settles over him, thick and suffocating, and for the first time, John realizes that this is the true cost of kingship. It is not the crown, nor the power that comes with it. It is the knowledge that one's rule can slip away, that the mantle of kingship can be torn away by the forces of history, by the voices of the people. And in this moment, as the fire burns low and the first rays of dawn break through the window, King John understands that his reign is no longer his own. It belongs to the world now. It belongs to the law. And the law, as he has come to understand, is not so easily bent. The cold stone of the royal palace feels especially harsh on this morning, as if the very walls of Windsor Castle have absorbed the weight of history, and now, with each passing moment, they groan under the burden of a kingdom in flux. The air within the throne room is still, save for the occasional rustle of cloaks as courtiers shift uneasily in their places. The fire in the hearth casts flickering shadows on the walls, but the warmth of flames does little to soothe the chill that has settled deep into King John's bones. His throne, once the seat of unchallenged power, now feels strangely distant from him, as if it belongs to another man entirely. John, wearing his heavy royal cloak, stands before the great window, gazing out across the vast expanse of his lands. But the view no longer brings him any comfort. The fields, the forests, the distant hills, they all seem to belong to another world, one in which he no longer reigns supreme. The kingdom that had once bent to his will now lies beneath him, restless, uneasy, as if waiting for the moment when the inevitable will arrive. And the inevitable is already here. The Magna Carta, the document that has come to symbolize both his failure and the dawn of a new order, rests on the table before him. It is a simple thing, this parchment, but it carries with it the weight of centuries of power and pride. Its words, once foreign to his ears, now feel as if they are carved into his very soul. The laws, the restrictions, the promises of liberty, each claws a nail in the coffin of his reign. He cannot escape the truth any longer. The world he had known is crumbling. His fingers, usually steady in moments of crisis, tremble ever so slightly as they hover over the edge of the document. The seal, once an unbreakable symbol of royal power, now seems like an anchor dragging him down into a deep abyss. He feels its weight, not just in his hand, but in his heart. To sign this document is to surrender, to acknowledge that the absolute power he once wielded has been irrevocably altered, that he is no longer the master of his own kingdom. Outside, the wind has begun to pick up, howling through the trees, a fitting prelude to the storm that rages within him. The once proud king is now trapped within the walls of his own making, the noose of history tightening around his neck. He can almost hear the voices of the barons echoing in his mind, voices that once swore fealty to him, but now demand more than he can give. They have already made their demands known, and the Magna Carta is the bitter fruit of their victory. For John, this moment has been a long time coming. It is not merely the result of the rebellion of the barons or the unrest that has brewed throughout his reign. It is a culmination of years of mistakes, of misjudgments, of a kingdom that has slowly slipped from his grasp. He had once believed that a king's word was final, that his rule was ordained by God. But now, as he stands before this simple piece of parchment, he is forced to confront the truth. His reign is no longer his own. He is bound, not by divine right, but by the very laws that he once sought to control. The faint sound of footsteps behind him signals the approach of his advisors, but he does not turn. He knows who they are, men who had once served him loyally, but who now stand at the threshold of history, watching as the kingdom changes before their eyes. Some of them, no doubt, are filled with a sense of triumph, but others, those who have been closest to him, understand the gravity of what is happening. They know that what John is about to do will not simply affect his reign. It will affect the future of the monarchy itself. A deep sigh escapes from John's lips as he turns slowly from the window, his mind heavy with the weight of what he is about to do. He has no choice. The barons have made it clear. If he does not sign the Magna Carta, they will continue their rebellion, and the kingdom will descend into chaos. The nobles, the church, even his own subjects, every one of them now looks to this moment for some sign that the old order is ending. He cannot delay this any longer. The world has changed, and he must bend to it, or risk losing everything. His eyes fall once more on the document. The words seem to blur before his eyes, as if they are moving on their own, shifting in a language he can no longer understand. Each line on the parchment feels like a weight on his shoulders, pulling him downward, closer to the earth, closer to the inevitability of what is to come. The Magna Carta is not just a document. It is a symbol of his failure, a failure to control, to reign, to keep his kingdom intact. It is a symbol of the end of an era, the end of the absolute power of kings. John's hand, though trembling, moves toward the quill. The decision has been made. There is no turning back. His signature, once so proud and sure, now feels like a final surrender. He dips the quill into the ink, the cold liquid a stark contrast to the warmth of the fire that crackles in the hearth. He raises it over the parchment, and in that moment, time seems to stretch out. He feels as if he is standing on the edge of a precipice, staring into the abyss below. The room is deathly silent, save for the sound of the quill scratching against the parchment. The ink flows onto the page, marking his name, marking the end of a reign, the end of a way of life. The wax seal, once a symbol of his unchallenged power, is now a mere formality. It presses down into the ink with the finality of a tombstone being lowered into place. And with it, the world changes. The king's word is no longer absolute. He is no longer above the law. The barons who stand at the edge of the room watch, their faces unreadable, their eyes fixed upon him. They have won, but there is no joy in their victory. There is only the knowledge that what they have demanded of the king is not a mere concession, but a fundamental shift in the nature of power. They are not just asking for more rights, more freedoms. They are asking for a complete reordering of society. The king, once a figurehead of divine right, is now a ruler bound by the very laws he once sought to control. John feels a deep sense of loss as he pulls his hand away from a parchment. It is done. The Magna Carta has been signed, and the weight of its consequences presses upon him. He looks up at the barons, their faces cold, impassive. They do not smile. There is no celebration here, no sense of triumph. They, too, know that this moment is not one of victory, but of necessity. They have fought for this change, but they, too, are aware of the price that has been paid. They have won not just a legal concession, but a shift in the very foundation of power in England. The silence in the room is overwhelming. John stands, his heart heavy, his mind clouded with 1,000 conflicting emotions. He knows that he has just signed away something irreplaceable. His power, his pride, his identity as king, gone in an instant. The words of the Magna Carta will be remembered for centuries. But what will be remembered of him? Will history see him as a coward who bowed to the demands of the barons? Or will they see him as a ruler who, in his darkest hour, chose to preserve the kingdom by giving up what he held most dear? The fire in the hearth crackles once more, its warmth an ironic contrast to the cold emptiness that now fills his chest. The barons turn, their footsteps echoing in the stone chamber as they begin to leave. They do not look back. They know that they have secured their place in history. But they also know that the work is just beginning. The Magna Carta is only the first step. The future of England and the future of the monarchy will be shaped by this moment. And John, standing alone in the silence of the room, understands that he will not be remembered as a king of power, but as a king who witnessed the end of an era. As the door closes behind them, John remains motionless, his hands still trembling as they rest upon the table. His kingdom is no longer his own. The weight of the Magna Carta hangs over him, a constant reminder of what he has lost and what has been gained by those who have challenged his rule. The air in the room feels thick, suffocating, as if the very walls are closing in on him. He had once believed that a king was invincible, but now he knows the truth. Power is fragile, and kings, like all men, are bound by forces greater than themselves. The great hall of Runnymede feels more like a tomb than a place of negotiation, as though the very stones of the ground beneath the men's feet carry the weight of centuries of power, rebellion, and inevitability. The morning fog still clings to the earth outside, seeping into the hall through cracks in the old wooden door, wrapping the room in a suffocating silence. Inside, the air smells of damp earth, candle smoke, and the distant, heavy scent of unspoken history. The flickering torchlight barely cuts through the gloom, casting long, shifting shadows upon the worn stone walls. It is a moment caught in time, a turning point in history that will never be undone. King John stands at the center of the room, his once imposing form now reduced, his posture stiff with a quiet desperation. The gold of his crown, heavy and oppressive, rests upon his brow, yet it no longer feels like a symbol of divine right. Instead, it feels like an anchor, pulling him deeper into the sea of his own failures. He has always been a king, but in this moment, he feels more like a prisoner. His reign, once absolute, now hangs by a thread, bound by a parchment that he is reluctant to touch but knows he must. Before him lies the Magna Carta, its edges rough and frayed, its ink still dark and bold. It is an imposing thing, not in its physical presence, but in its weight, its power to reshape everything he thought he knew about his own authority. The barons stand around him, their faces hard and resolute. They do not look like men who have won a battle. They look like men who have borne the weight of history upon their shoulders, knowing that what they have achieved here will change everything. But they are not here to celebrate. There is no victory in their eyes, only the grim knowledge that this moment, while necessary, is a death of sorts, the death of an old world, the death of an unchallenged monarch. John's gaze shifts from the baron's back to the document. He knows that this moment will be his legacy, that centuries from now, his name will be synonymous with a loss of power. But even in the face of such finality, his mind reels with questions. Had it been inevitable? Could he have prevented it? In the heat of his reign, he had thought himself untouchable, his word the law. He had ruled with arrogance, with an iron fist, thinking that power could be held forever. But now, with the Magna Carta before him, he knows that it is slipping from his grasp. What had once been a kingdom forged in the strength of one man's was now becoming something entirely different. A kingdom where power will be shared, where a king will no longer be above the law. The silence in the hall is palpable, almost suffocating, as the barons wait for him to make the final move. King John can feel the weight of their gaze, the expectation that he will sign the document that will forever alter the balance of power. His hand hovers over the parchment, trembling ever so slightly. It is not just a fear of signing. It is a fear of what will mean for him, for his reign, for the crown he has worn with such pride. His signature will not just mark the end of his absolute rule. It will mark the end of the monarchy as it has existed for centuries. The crown will still rest upon his head, but it will no longer be a symbol of divine authority. It will no longer carry the weight of unchallenged rule. King John's mind drifts back to the days before Runnymede, when it still believed that his power was unassailable. He had grown accustomed to ruling with an iron fist, to making decisions without regard for the consequences. He had never known the pain of true opposition, not until the barons had begun to rise against him, demanding changes to his rule, demanding the very freedoms that he had long denied them. Their voices had grown louder, their demands more urgent, until the moment had arrived when he could no longer ignore them. The Magna Carta had become the symbol of their rebellion, but it was also a symbol of his failure, a failure that had begun long before the ink had been laid to paper. He remembers the early signs of unrest, the subtle whispers in the court, the murmurs of rebellion in the halls, the growing tension between the barons and his government. He had dismissed it all as petty discontent, the work of a few troublemakers who sought to undermine his authority. But then came the demands for the return of lands, for protection of the church, for the right to govern without the constant interference of royal officers. They had been unrelenting, and now, here he stood, face to face with the consequences. His own nobles, those who had sworn loyalty to him, now stood as his enemies, demanding that he sign away the very power that had once been his birthright. The Magna Carta, though it carries the weight of rebellion, also carries the weight of justice that had long been denied to the people of England. The barons have not simply asked for more power, they have asked for balance. They have asked for a king who will no longer rule as an absolute monarch, but as a ruler bound by law. They have asked for the king's promises to be enforced, for his word to be subject to the very laws he once commanded. It is a radical shift, one that will forever change the way England is governed. But John is not ready to let go. Even now, as his hand hovers over the quill, he can feel a part of him resisting the inevitable. He does not want to give in. He does not want to admit that he has been defeated. And yet, as the seconds stretch on, he knows that there is no other choice. The barons will not relent. The kingdom will descend into chaos if he does not comply. His heart heavy with the weight of his own pride, he finally dips the quill into the ink. The sound of it scratching across the parchment fills the room, reverberating in the stone walls as if echoing the finality of the decision. His signature, the final mark of a king whose power has been broken, is now on the page. The ink, dark and unforgiving, spreads across the paper, sealing his fate and the fate of the monarchy. The seal, when pressed into place, is not a symbol of triumph. It is a symbol of surrender. A king who once ruled by divine right has now bound himself to the very laws he once sought to control. His signature may be on the parchment, but it is the people of England, the barons, and the common folk alike, who have written the true story of this day. The room remains still, heavy with the weight of what has just transpired. The barons, who had once looked upon him as a king above all else, now see him as something different, no longer a divine figure, but a ruler who is subject to the same laws as every other man. They do not smile. There is no joy in this victory. There is only the knowledge that what they have done here today is not a mere act of rebellion. It is the beginning of a new age, an age in which power is no longer concentrated in the hands of one man, but is shared among the people, the nobles, and the law. John looks at the parchment, his breath shallow and uneven. It is done. The Magna Carta has been signed, and with it, a new order has been established. He can feel the weight of it in his chest, a pressure that seems to grow with each passing second. The power he once wielded so easily is now gone, and in its place is a fragile balance that he cannot control. The idea that a king could act without regard for the law is now a thing of the past. The idea that his word was law is now a distant memory. The barons begin to file out of the room, their steps soft on the stone floor. They do not look back. They have achieved what they set out to do, and the significance of the moment is not lost on them. But there is no sense of celebration in their eyes, only the quiet understanding that this is only the beginning. The Magna Carta may have been signed, but the real work will come in the years ahead, as the words of the document are put to the test. They know that the kingdom will never be the same, and they know that the future of the monarchy itself is uncertain. John remained behind, standing alone in the center of the room. His hand, still trembling, rests upon the table. The Magna Carta lies before him, its words now irrevocably tied to his own name. He cannot undo what has been done. The kingdom he once ruled with absolute power is no more. The future is uncertain, and in this moment of quiet reflection, John understands that he will not be remembered as a king who wielded power, but as a king who witnessed the end of an era. Outside, the sky is just beginning to lighten, the first rays of dawn breaking through the clouds. The world is waking, but within the walls of Runnymede, the silence remains. The air still carries the weight of the past, but soon it will be filled with the sounds of a new world. A world in which no man, not even a king, is above the law. The landscape outside the castle walls is veiled in a thick mist, the pale gray light of dawn filtering through the shrouded sky. The air is damp and cold, hanging heavily over the earth, as though the world itself is holding its breath. A long, slow silence stretches across the countryside, broken only by the occasional whisper of wind rustling through the trees. The morning feels heavy with the weight of history, as if the very land has absorbed the tension of what is about to unfold within the walls of the castle. Inside, the vast hall of the royal chambers is cloaked in shadow, the high stone walls and vaulted ceilings casting a feeling of immensity and isolation. The flickering flames on the hearth cast dancing shadows across the faces of the men who fill the room, faces that reflect both the triumph and the inevitability of this moment. King John stands at the center of it all, his gaze distant, lost in the same fog that clings to the world outside. He had once ruled with an unshakable certainty, with the iron will of a monarch who believed his word was law and his throne unassailable. But now, standing at the edge of his own undoing, he is no longer the figure of unchallenged authority. His crown, heavy upon his brow, feels like a burden more than a symbol of divine right. The kingdom he had once controlled with ease now slips through his fingers, and there is nothing he can do to stop it. The Magna Carta, this simple, powerful document, has brought him to the precipice. John's fingers, usually steady and commanding, tremble slightly as they hover over the parchment. The Magna Carta lies before him, a testament to both the rebellion of his barons and the demands of a kingdom that has grown weary of his rule. His eyes trace the ink on the page, the carefully drafted words that will forever change the balance of power in England. The document is not just a piece of parchment. It is the weight of his failure. Each line, each clause, is a reminder of what he has lost. His absolute control, his unchallenged authority, and the security of his reign. He glances at the men who stand around him, the barons who have forced him into this position. Their faces are hard, their eyes unwavering, but there is no joy in their expressions. This is not a moment of victory for them, but a moment of necessity. They, too, understand the gravity of the situation. The Magna Carta may be their triumph, but it is also the death knell of the system that has governed England for centuries. There is no elation in their eyes, no celebration of a king brought to his knees, only the quiet understanding that this is a pivotal moment in history, a moment that will change everything. John's breath comes in shallow gasps, the weight of what is about to happen pressing down on his chest. His hand hovers over the parchment, the quill poised above the paper, but he cannot bring himself to make the mark. A part of him rebels against this moment. A king, he thinks, should never be brought to the point of signing away his power. His pride, his identity, is tied to the idea of the monarchy as an unchallenged institution. But as the barons stand in silence, their eyes fix upon him, he knows that there is no choice. If he does not sign, the kingdom will fracture. Civil war is already a whisper on the wind. And so, with a deep, reluctant sigh, he lowers his hand to the quill. The sound of ink scratching across parchment echoes in the chamber, filling the room with the finality of a decision. John's signature is no longer the proud flourish of a monarch confident in his rule. It is the hesitant stroke of a man who has been forced into surrender. As the ink spreads across the page, sealing the document, John feels something inside him break. The power he once held, power that he believed was by divine right, has now been stripped away. The Magna Carta, once a symbol of rebellion, is now a symbol of his own defeat. The seal presses down, its cold wax snapping into place with a sound that seems to reverberate through the very bones of the castle. It is the sound of a door closing, the sound of a world shifting, of an era fading into memory. And as John looks down at the document, he knows that the world he once ruled is no longer the same. He is no longer the same. Outside, the mist begins to lift, the first rays of sunlight piercing to the clouds, casting a pale light upon the land. The world is waking, but inside the castle, time seems to stand still. John remains frozen, staring at the parchment before him, the weight of what he's just done pressing down upon with a force he cannot escape. His heart is heavy, and his mind is clouded with regret. The Magna Carta is not just a document. It is the embodiment of his failure as a king, the mark of a ruler who could not hold his kingdom together. As the barons begin to leave, their footsteps echoing softly on the stone floor, John remains where he is, staring at the words on the page. The room feels empty now, the silence broken only by the distant crackling of the fire in the hearth. His eyes trace the words again, as if they could somehow offer him some solace, some understanding of what has just happened. But the words do not offer comfort. They are a stark reminder of the power that he has lost. What had gone wrong? John wonders. How had he come to this? His mind drifts back to the beginning of his reign, when he had ascended to the throne with the promise of stability, of strength, of a kingdom that will remain united under his rule. But that promise had been broken, piece by piece, by his own hand. The heavy taxation, the mismanagement, the arbitrary decisions that had alienated the barons and his subjects, these were the seeds of the rebellion that had now culminated in the signing of the Magna Carta. But it was not just the barons who had turned against him. It was the kingdom itself, the people, the nobles, the church. Everyone had grown weary of his rule. The Magna Carta, once a symbol of a few rebellious nobles seeking to limit his power, had become the voice of a kingdom crying out for change. And now, with the signing of that document, the king who had once held all the power had been reduced to a mere figurehead, bound by the law, by the very forces that had once been beneath him. John's eyes remain fixed on the Magna Carta, but he can no longer see the words. They blur before his eyes, as if the parchment itself has become a symbol of his own blurred vision, a vision of a world he can no longer control. The silence in the room feels suffocating, and for the first time, he feels the weight of his crown as something other than a symbol of glory. It is a weight that pulls him down, deeper into the knowledge that his reign, his legacy, is no longer his own. He stands there for what feels like an eternity, his mind spinning, his heart heavy with regret. The air around him grows colder, and the fire in the hearth burns lower, casting shadows that stretch across the stone floor. And in the silence, he is left with the understanding that the world has moved on. His reign is over, and the Magna Carta is the sign of that end. As the last of the barons file out of the hall, their footsteps soft but resolute, John remains in the center of the room, alone with the knowledge that everything has changed. The world outside may still be waking to the dawn of a new day, but inside this hall, the night has fallen, and the future remains uncertain. The Magna Carta has been signed, and the monarchy has been irrevocably altered. John's heart aches with the realization that he is no longer the king he once was. He is a man bound by law, by the very forces he once commanded. The land outside, shrouded in mist, seems to reflect his own sense of loss. The kingdom that once belonged to him is no longer his own. The dawn has come, but for King John, it feels like the end of an era. The Magna Carta may have brought a new age of justice and liberty, but for him, it has come at a cost, one that he will carry with him for the rest of his days. The day is slow to unfold, as the first whispers of morning fog cling to the edges of the Thames. A heavy stillness rests upon Runnymede, as if the earth itself has paused, aware of the momentous occasion that is about to unfold. The air is thick, damp with the scent of dew and earth, and the cries of birds are muffled by the fog that rolls across the land. King John stands by the river, his gaze cast far across the water, but he does not see the movement of the current, nor the boats that drift lazily downstream. His mind is not on the world around him, but on the storm that churns inside. The Magna Carta lies before him, the final document of a rebellion he had never seen coming, a rebellion of which he had once been unaware until it had become too late. The barons, his own men, had risen up against him. Their demands were not just the demands of a few, not simply the outcry of noblemen, but the voice of the people. They spoke of rights, of laws, of freedom from his unchecked rule. And now, standing by the river, John realizes that this moment is not just a rebellion. It is the end of an era, the fall of the monarchy that had once seemed unshakable. The parchment, sitting on the table in the chamber nearby, is not simply a contract. It is the death of his sovereignty. The ink upon it does not speak of laws or freedoms alone. It speaks of the collapse of divine rule, the shattering of the sacred idea of kingship. The king had long believed that his word was law, that he was appointed by God himself to rule, but now, in the face of the Magna Carta, he is forced to confront a brutal reality. His power is no longer absolute. John moves slowly toward the chamber, his steps heavy. The royal cloak, once a sign of his grandeur, drags slightly upon the stone floor, as though it too has grown weary of its master's rule. He enters the room where the Magna Carta lies, its weight pressing down upon him with an unrelenting force. He cannot escape it. The barons have gathered outside, waiting for his decision. The quiet murmur of their voices drifts in from the hall, but it offers no comfort. The murmur is not of hope or victory, but of cold necessity. They have won, and he is lost. In the dim light of the room, John stands still, gazing at the parchment. The seal rests upon it, waiting for the final touch, the mark of a king who had once believed he could never be bound by law, a king who had ruled with a sense of divine entitlement, who had commanded his people with a sense of invincibility. But this document, the Magna Carta, has stripped away that sense of invincibility. It is a powerful symbol, not just of the baron's demands, but the world changing beneath his feet. He wonders how he had come to this. How had he, John, son of Henry II, a king in his own right, fallen so far from the power he had once held with an iron fist? Was it the constant wars, the endless taxation, the mismanagement of his nobles? Perhaps, in his arrogance, he had believed that as king, his word was final. And now, in the cold silence of the chamber, he understands that his word is no longer law. The Magna Carta has been signed before in principle by other monarchs, but never with the force of such a rebellion behind it. never with the weight of an entire kingdom demanding change. In the face of it, John knows that he cannot hold out. The rebellion is too deep, too powerful. The barons are not just fighting for land or for the return of their rights. They are fighting for a new world, a world in which a king must answer to the law, just like every other man. And this, John understands, is what the Magna Carta demands of him. It is not merely a document that limits his power. It is a document that forces him to acknowledge that he is bound by the law, that his rule is no longer the divine gift it once was. The sound of footsteps in the hallway interrupts his thoughts. The barons are waiting, and John knows that his time is running out. The decisions he has made throughout his reign have led him here, and now there is only one thing left to do: to sign the Magna Carta, to surrender his absolute power, to bow to the law that he once believed was beneath him. The room grows colder as the moment stretches on, and he wonders if the world outside will ever feel the same again. Finally, John moves toward the table, his hand shaking slightly as it hovers above the parchment. The quill rests on the ink pot, waiting for him to make the mark. His fingers, stiff with hesitation, close around it, and for a moment, everything stops. The past, with all its failures, its victories, its glories, seems to crowd in upon him. The weight of the crown on his brow feels almost unbearable now, as if it were a reminder of everything he has lost. He dips the quill into the ink, the cold liquid sliding against the feathers. His heart pounds his chest, each beat a drum of inevitability. The moment has come. His hand moves, trembling slightly, and the quill meets the parchment. The scratching sound of ink against paper seems impossibly loud in the room, each stroke a testament to the end of his reign, the end of an age. He signs his name. John. No flourish, no pride. Just a name, his name, on a document that will forever change the course of history. The seal, once a symbol of royal authority, is pressed into the wax with the finality of a tombstone being sealed. A king's life, once so full of promise and power, is now bound to the will of his people, to the law. No longer will John be the monarch who rules without question, whose word is final. No longer will the crown be a symbol of unchecked power. From this moment forward, his power will be shared, and the law will stand above all. The room is still, save for flickering of the fire in the hearth, and John stands there, staring at the signed parchment. The barons will take it from him soon, and then they will return to their lands, to their power. They will leave behind a kingdom that is no longer his, a kingdom that will soon no longer be ruled by the idea of a divinely appointed king, but by the laws of the land, by the will of the people.